Why do humans need sleep? Sleep occupies roughly a third of a human life, yet for most of scientific history it was treated as a mysterious void, a period when the brain simply switched off. Modern neuroscience has overturned that assumption entirely. Sleep is now understood to be one of the most biologically active and essential processes the body performs, touching nearly every system: the brain, the immune system, the cardiovascular system, metabolism, and emotional regulation. Far from being wasted time, sleep is the period during which the body repairs, consolidates, and prepares itself for the next waking day. This article explores the many reasons humans need sleep, what happens inside the body during it, and what the consequences are when we don't get enough. The architecture of sleep. Before examining why sleep matters, it helps to understand what sleep actually is. Sleep is not a single, uniform state. It cycles through distinct stages, each with its own brainwave patterns and physiological purpose. These stages fall into two broad categories: non-rapid eye movement, NREM, sleep, and rapid eye movement, REM, sleep. NREM sleep is further divided into three stages. Stage 1 is the light transition between wakefulness and sleep, lasting only a few minutes. Stage 2 follows, characterized by slower brain waves interspersed with brief bursts of activity called sleep spindles, which are thought to play a role in memory processing. Stage 3, often called slow wave or deep sleep, is the most physically restorative stage, marked by large, slow delta waves. This is when growth hormone is released, tissue repair accelerates, and the body's energy stores are replenished. REM sleep, which typically begins about 90 minutes after falling asleep, is where most vivid dreaming occurs. The brain becomes highly active, in some ways more active than during wakefulness, while the body's major muscles are temporarily paralyzed, likely to prevent people from physically acting out their dreams. A full night of sleep cycles through these stages 4 to 6 times, with deep sleep dominating the earlier cycles and REM sleep becoming more prominent toward morning. This is one reason why cutting sleep short disproportionately robs the brain of REM sleep, even if total sleep time seems only modestly reduced. Clearing the brain's waste. One of the most significant discoveries in sleep science over the past 15 years involves what happens to the brain's waste clearance system during sleep. Researchers identified a network of channels called the glymphatic system, which flushes cerebrospinal fluid through brain tissue to remove metabolic byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. Among these byproducts is beta-amyloid, a protein strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease. Studies in animal models found that the glymphatic system becomes dramatically more active during sleep, with the spaces between brain cells expanding to allow fluid to flow more freely, sometimes by as much as 60% compared to the waking brain. This suggests that one of sleep's core functions is essentially housekeeping, clearing out cellular debris that would otherwise build up and potentially contribute to neurodegenerative disease over time. Chronic sleep deprivation has been linked in research to elevated levels of beta-amyloid and tau proteins, both implicated in Alzheimer's pathology, which may help explain why poor sleep in midlife is associated with higher dementia risk decades later. Memory consolidation and learning. Sleep plays an outsized role in how the brain processes and stores information. During the day, the brain takes in an enormous amount of sensory input and experience, but this information is initially stored in a fragile, unstable form, primarily in a brain region called the hippocampus. Sleep is when much of this information gets consolidated, transferred and reorganized into more durable, long-term storage in the cortex. Different types of memory appear to rely on different sleep stages. Deep, slow-wave sleep is particularly important for consolidating declarative memories, facts, events, and information you can consciously recall, such as material studied for an exam. REM sleep, on the other hand, appears more closely tied to procedural memory and skill learning, as well as to emotional processing of memories. Experiments have repeatedly shown that people who sleep after learning a new task, whether it's a list of words, a motor skill, or a problem-solving strategy, perform better when tested later than people who stay awake for an equivalent period. Sleep doesn't just preserve what was learned, it appears to actively reorganize it, strengthening useful connections and pruning away less relevant ones, and in some cases even helping people find creative solutions or insights they couldn't reach while awake. Emotional regulation. Sleep and emotional health are tightly intertwined. During REM sleep, the brain processes emotionally charged memories in a way that seems to strip them of some of their intensity while preserving the informational content, a kind of overnight therapy. Neuroimaging research has shown that after a night of REM-rich sleep, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, responds less intensely to emotionally provocative images than it does after a night of sleep deprivation. This is one reason sleep-deprived people tend to be more reactive, irritable, and prone to negative emotional interpretations of neutral events. Even a single night of significantly reduced sleep has been shown to increase activity in the amygdala while weakening its connectivity to the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational judgment and emotional control. In other words, sleep loss doesn't just make people tired, it functionally disconnects the brain's emotional alarm system from its regulatory oversight, leaving reactions less measured and more impulsive. This relationship also runs in both directions. Chronic insomnia and poor sleep quality are strongly associated with higher rates of anxiety and depression, and sleep disturbance is often one of the earliest symptoms to appear when mood disorders develop. Physical restoration and growth. Sleep is also a period of significant physical repair. During deep NREM sleep, the pituitary gland releases growth hormone, which stimulates tissue growth, muscle repair, and bone development. This is particularly critical in children and adolescents, whose physical growth is heavily dependent on adequate sleep, but it remains important throughout adulthood for muscle recovery and cellular repair. Sleep also plays a key role in cardiovascular health. Blood pressure naturally dips during sleep in a pattern known as nocturnal dipping, giving the heart and blood vessels a period of reduced strain. People who don't experience this dip, often due to poor or insufficient sleep, face elevated risk of hypertension and cardiovascular disease over time. Long-term studies have consistently found that people who sleep fewer than 6 hours a night have a significantly higher risk of heart attack, stroke, and other cardiovascular events compared to those getting 7 to 8 hours. Immune function. The connection between sleep and immunity is well established. During sleep, the body increases production of certain cytokines, proteins that help regulate immune responses and fight infection and inflammation. Sleep deprivation, by contrast, suppresses this activity. In one well-known study, researchers exposed people to a common cold virus and found that those who had been sleeping fewer than 7 hours a night in the preceding weeks were roughly 4 times more likely to develop a cold than those sleeping 8 hours or more. Sleep also affects how well the body responds to vaccination. Research has found that people who are sleep-deprived around the time of vaccination produce a weaker antibody response than those who sleep normally, meaning their immune systems mount a less robust and less durable defense. Chronic short sleep has additionally been linked to persistent low-grade inflammation, which is itself a contributing factor in a wide range of conditions, from cardiovascular disease to metabolic disorders. Metabolic and hormonal regulation. Sleep exerts powerful control over the hormones that regulate hunger and metabolism. 2 hormones in particular, leptin, which signals fullness, and ghrelin, which stimulates appetite, are directly affected by sleep duration. Sleep deprivation lowers leptin levels and raises ghrelin levels, a combination that increases hunger and drives cravings for high-calorie, carbohydrate-dense foods. This helps explain why chronic short sleep is consistently associated with weight gain and higher rates of obesity in population studies. Sleep loss also impairs insulin sensitivity. Even short-term sleep restriction, as little as a few nights of reduced sleep in a controlled laboratory setting, has been shown to reduce the body's ability to regulate blood sugar effectively, producing insulin resistance patterns similar to those seen in prediabetes. Over time, chronic sleep deprivation is considered an independent risk factor for the development of type 2 diabetes, separate from other lifestyle factors like diet and exercise. Why sleep evolved? Competing theories. Given how vulnerable sleep makes an organism, unconscious, immobile, and unaware of predators, its persistence across nearly the entire animal kingdom is something of an evolutionary puzzle. Several theories attempt to explain why sleep evolved and persisted despite this cost. The energy conservation theory suggests sleep evolved to reduce energy expenditure during periods when activity would be inefficient or dangerous, such as at night for a diurnal species. The restorative theory holds that sleep allows the body to repair cellular damage and restore energy stores like glycogen that are depleted during waking hours. The brain plasticity theory, which has gained significant traction in recent decades, argues that sleep is essential for reorganizing neural connections, supporting the memory consolidation and learning functions described earlier. Most sleep researchers today believe these theories are not mutually exclusive. Sleep likely serves multiple overlapping functions simultaneously, which is part of why its evolutionary persistence, despite the risks, makes sense. An organism that gained restorative, cognitive, and metabolic benefits all from one behavior would have a substantial survival advantage over one that did not sleep at all. The consequences of sleep deprivation. The effects of inadequate sleep extend well beyond feeling groggy. Cognitively, sleep deprivation impairs attention, reaction time, working memory, and decision-making. After roughly 18 hours without sleep, cognitive performance can decline to a level comparable to having a blood alcohol concentration at or above the legal driving limit in many countries. This is why drowsy driving is a significant road safety issue, responsible for a substantial share of vehicle accidents and fatalities each year. Chronic partial sleep deprivation, getting, say, 6 hours a night over an extended period, has effects that compound over time, even if the person subjectively feels they've adapted. Research has shown that after 2 weeks of restricted sleep, cognitive performance can decline to levels equivalent to going without sleep entirely for 24 hours, even though the sleep-restricted participants reported feeling only mildly tired. This disconnect between subjective feeling and actual impairment is one of the more concerning findings in sleep research, since it means people chronically shortchanging their sleep often don't realize how compromised their functioning has become. Long-term consequences of chronic insufficient sleep include increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, weakened immune function, mood disorders, and, as discussed, elevated risk of neurodegenerative disease. Large epidemiological studies have found that both very short sleep, under 6 hours, and, to a lesser extent, very long sleep, over 9 hours, are associated with increased mortality risk, suggesting that sleep duration follows something of a Goldilocks pattern, not too little, not too much. How much sleep do we actually need? Sleep needs vary by age and, to some degree, by individual. Newborns require around 14 to 17 hours a day, though much of this is fragmented across short cycles. School-age children generally need 9 to 11 hours, while teenagers need about 8 to 10 hours, a requirement that is frequently unmet given early school start times combined with a natural shift in adolescent circadian rhythms toward later sleep and wake times. Most adults need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night for optimal functioning, though there is some individual variation. Older adults often experience changes in sleep architecture, lighter sleep, more nighttime awakenings, and less deep sleep, but their underlying sleep need doesn't decrease as dramatically as commonly believed. Rather, their ability to achieve consolidated, high-quality sleep tends to decline. Conclusion. Sleep is not a passive, dispensable state but an active biological necessity woven into the function of nearly every organ system. It clears metabolic waste from the brain, consolidates memories, regulates emotions, repairs tissue, strengthens the immune system, and balances the hormones that govern hunger and metabolism. The evolutionary persistence of sleep across the animal kingdom, despite its obvious risks, is itself powerful evidence of how essential its functions must be. As research continues to reveal just how deeply sleep is integrated into physical and mental health, the case for prioritizing consistent, sufficient sleep only grows stronger, not as a luxury, but as one of the most fundamental pillars of human health, alongside diet and exercise.